Hi, everybody. It's meteorologist Joe Cioffi on this Monday night, and we are looking at Tropical Storm Franklin, a well-organized tropical storm. And you can see the core here of the circulation. And it looks like, there's a little, it's hard to say. I mean, it's still kind of in the development phase here. Um, we have a core of convection near the center and a clear spot in the middle. I mean, I don't know if that's a sign of an actual eye developing, but the system does have a few more hours before it moves inland into the Yucatan Peninsula. It's kind of moving right along on a northwest, or maybe starting to bend back a little bit more to the west in the last few hours. But everything seems to be moving on course here with regards to Franklin moving inland. And then we'll spend the day tomorrow crossing the Yucatan Peninsula, and then we'll emerge out in the southwestern Gulf of Mexico. When we look at the intensity guidance of the weather models, actually most of them keep it a tropical storm while it's moving over land. That might be a bit unrealistic. I wouldn't be surprised if it weakens to a strong tropical depression. But once it gets out to the other side, we have a few of the models increasing this to minimal hurricane status. We actually have one that takes it up to a Category 3 before it moves inland over Mexico. And, the Category 3 is on the outlier side. I think there's a fair chance that this is going to become a minimal hurricane at some point. And we look at the model intensity guide, the model forecast guidance. It's all clustered together pretty well. They start to diverge a little bit, but most of the tracks are west-northwest and then westerly, taking it inland over southeastern Mexico and then moving it across through Mexico and then out on the Pacific side. I think that is going to definitely be the case. There's no chance that this is going to go further north. Now, looking at winds now way up into the atmosphere, 200 millibars. So we're going way up to the top of the atmosphere, and the white area wind speeds of 20 knots or less. And you can see that this system is in a very, very light wind shear environment. So it's no surprise that it has strengthened. It had to wait for a tiny little upper low to disappear, and once it did, the system just got going. And notice that the upper winds in the southwestern Gulf remain fairly light. There's an upper level high that's sitting over it, so this has every chance of becoming a minimal hurricane as it tracks to the west and then inland. And by the way, if we look out here in the Atlantic, this is our upper low that's producing all the wind shear. You can see it here, very, very strong upper low, and the blue and the darker blues, 20, 30, 40 knots of wind. So we do have some strong winds in the upper layers of the atmosphere. So that's the reason why that's tropical wave that's out in the Atlantic is going to have a difficult time for a while. Whoops, that wasn't supposed to happen. See if I can get it. There we go. Sorry about that. So you can see here's that tropical wave. Doesn't have a whole lot of thunderstorm activity with it, and I suspect that wave is going to remain rather weak. Let's go to the European model because a couple of things with respect to the European model. Here is Franklin, and it follows along the rest of the track guidance. It may be on the northern edge of the envelope in terms of the model tracks. The European has been a little suspect lately with the tracks of non-tropical systems along the east coast too far to the north. But with respect to the system, the tropical wave, one of the things that is going to happen to that upper low, and I'm going to switch back to the GFS because I think we should look at that again. I want to go to that 200 millibar map. Okay, so let me back it up, and if it wants to behave itself. So that upper low that on the water vapor imagery is sitting right in here is migrating back to the west. So over time, as we look at this, that upper low actually drops southwestward into the Caribbean. So this might make for a more favorable environment if that tropical wave holds together once it moves north of Puerto Rico and the Dominican Republic. And indeed, when we look at the European on this, on the surface, this is what represents that tropical wave, this kink in the isobar. It actually has a little bit of a closed low center there, but let's say it's somewhere in this kink. And this afternoon's model run actually spun that up east of the Bahamas and off the southeast coast as a tropical storm early next week. So it'll be interesting to see. The model has done this from time to time over the last few days. The GFS does not have anything with regards to this. So we're giving a little bit more credence to the European overall, but let's see it do it for at least 3 or 4 runs before we start to pay a little bit more attention to all this. Now, let me go to the surface map. We'll give you a brief rundown of what's going on in the east, and of course, the rain that we had today, and it was substantial in some spots, especially in southern New Jersey and points south, where we had some severe weather and flash flooding. Let me just go to the satellite to the east, and here we have it right there. Freshen it up, and looks like the bulk of the rain has moved out. We still have some leftover clouds back through Virginia and precipitation down and through North Carolina. That's moving to the east, and gradually drier air is pushing southward. So we should see improving weather conditions on Tuesday. And in the west, during the late afternoon and evening hours, beginning to see the diurnal shower and thunderstorm activity develop in the central and southern Rockies, and then back up into parts of the northwest. So getting a little bit more activity than they usually do. So let's look at what we expect going forward, and we really don't see much in the way of change here. There is Franklin on the southern edge of the picture, and we get this weather front to move on through. Looks like the weather should be dry into Friday in the northeast, and then the next warm front, cold front combination comes in. We'll see if we have to deal with an onshore flow, followed by a cold front Sunday night, and then a pretty nice dry cool high comes down for early next week. So that'll be nice to see, and then we're past the middle of the month. Now, the models have been kind of going back and forth on the idea of whether there'll be a ridge developing in the eastern part of the United States, and that still remains to be seen. Today's model run on the upper air kind of tries to bring a ridge back toward the end of the period again. But I want to go back to the beginning here on the upper air for the GFS, because if there's going to be some system coming around the periphery of the blue Bermuda High, it's been a long day today, the Bermuda High, we're going to have to watch to see what kind of troughing we have here in the eastern part of the United States, the character of the troughing. And when we look going into Monday and Tuesday of next week, you can see that the flow off the east coast from North Carolina northward is west-southwest. So that would take anything up and out. The European kind of implies this in its upper air view, but the trough is stretched back a little bit. And then, of course, you've got this other upper low that it suddenly drops into from southeastern Canada southwestward toward Lake Superior. So that's kind of weird that it does that. It actually starts that upper low from way up in Canada. I think this view will show it a lot better. But it starts this upper low way up in Canada, and then it just drops it south and then southwestward and strengthens it toward Lake Superior. You don't see that happen too often, but the general flow across the eastern part of the United States is still this active jet that runs from west to east. So if something were to develop, I would tend to think that unless the trough is further west in how it shapes up and the flow is more southwest, that you're going to have anything that develops out here wind up staying offshore. At least that's what it looks like at the moment. So just let's real fast. This is the National Hurricane Center's map from 7 p.m. Central Time. You can see the official forecast track bringing it onshore as a tropical storm and then offshore as a tropical storm by 1 a.m. Wednesday and reaching minimal hurricane status by Wednesday afternoon before probably moving inland sometime early or late Wednesday night or early Thursday morning along the south coast of Mexico. And I think that makes total sense given what the weather models are showing us. So we'll leave it right here. We're going to switch over to a bit of a live chat. And you can, of course, feel free to ask whatever questions you'd like with regards to the tropics or anything else for that matter. And just stand by while we the tropics or anything else for that matter. And just stand by while we okay, so live chat time. Tropics or anything else for that matter. And just stand by while we here we go. We'll just wait for the double. Okay, so let me shut the audio off. Live chat time. Hang on. Okay, so now we should be good. All right. So we'll check to see the Hurricane Center's new advisory should be out soon. In fact, it is out. The new advisory is at 19.1 north, 87.3 west. Top winds are 60 miles an hour. The pressure has dropped down to 995 millibars. And going to wait and see. Let me see if I can get a quick peek of what their forecast is. So they basically bring it inland at its current strength now, weaken it to a minimal tropical storm, but then it's back to 45 knots when it moves back out over the water by tomorrow evening. And they do strengthen it to minimal hurricane strength by Wednesday afternoon, and then inland from there, somewhere near 20 and a half degrees north, and probably at around 97 west on the new forecast. So I just want to see, they don't have the technical discussion yet. It is just posted, so I'm just going to give it a quick read here. Satellite images and radar data from Belize show Franklin has an expansive and symmetrical circulation. I think the satellite loop does show that. Recent microwave indicate that the cyclone does not have a well-defined inner core. That could be why we're seeing, those circular pockets where there's not a lot of cloud cover, which is characterized by an elliptical ring of convection that is open on the northwest side. In addition, cloud tops are not very cold, and on and on and on. Hurricane Hunter data earlier, 50 knots. Satellite presentation hasn't improved, so they're just leaving the intensity the same. And I think the forecast logic going forward is pretty much unchanged. So I think you're going to see Franklin do what it's going to do and probably become a minimal hurricane on Wednesday before it goes in over Mexico. I did notice, let me just acknowledge first of all, let me roll back on the screen if it would just let me, so I can get all your comments. There you go. There's a scroll bar. So Wesley, making reference to the convection and thunderstorms that are north of Puerto Rico, that might be a weak tropical wave there, but it's interacting with the strong upper air storm that's sitting out in the Atlantic at the moment, and that's what that is. And that upper air storm is forecast to move southwestward into the Caribbean, and if that happens, that creates a more favorable environment late this week and this weekend for when that wave that's still out in the central Atlantic gets there, assuming that wave survives or some semblance of that wave winds up surviving. Wesley, you know what? You're bringing up the Kelvin wave, and I really don't know too much about that. That's not something I pay attention to. Carol G., what about the storm in the Atlantic? Carol, there's no tropical storm in the Atlantic. There is just a weak tropical wave in the central Atlantic, and that is moving westward and remains weak and disorganized. And the weather models today, but with the European specifically, does wind up trying to develop that over the weekend once that remnant wave or whatever's holding with that wave, maybe a weak low, winds up getting west of 65 or west of 70 degrees west. It actually tries to make some kind of tropical depression or tropical storm out of that in the Bahamas. But it's done that on and off over the last couple of days. So I want to see some reliability. I want to see 3 runs in a row at least to kind of give me a little bit of confidence that the model is picking up on something. And by the way, the GFS is not showing it, which is probably a good thing because since that model had a Category 4 hurricane moving up the East Coast this coming weekend and early next week, that clearly is not going to happen. Excuse me. And it also had the system in the Atlantic already as a Category 1, and that's not happening. So, we should be, we'll watch the European and see what it does. Okay, Robin, we're in Playa del Carmen between Tulum and Cancun. Okay, the closer you are to Cancun, you're going to be on the northern, the northern side of the system, and it's going to go in to the south of you. I think you're going to be okay. You probably will get some rain and wind out of it, but I don't expect it to be anything that you can't handle. Did Mexico experience near hurricane force or hurricane force gusts? Rian, I haven't seen any reports of anything on land with regards to winds gusting to hurricane force, at least not yet. Nathaniel Knight, at what month the hurricane season would be wild? We'll put wild in quotes. September is the most active month, and we seem to be working in a very methodical way in the atmosphere. Everything looks fairly average when you look at water temperatures and a few other things. So I suspect that we're going to see the activity move into September. September being the most active month of the hurricane season. I think that will play out according to plan. Everything has been happening pretty much on course here with regards to the development of tropical storms on the Atlantic side. And the Pacific side, by the way, has gotten very quiet, which is usually at a point when the Pacific side gets quiet, the Atlantic side gets active, and that seems to be also playing according to plan. Now, with regards to the rest of the weather in my neck of the woods, being the New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Long Island, Hudson Valley, Connecticut area, the rain is done for the most part. There are just a few residual leftover showers around. We're going to see improving weather conditions with sunshine and reasonable temperatures over the next 3 days, upper 70s and low 80s, with comfortable humidities. Still no sign of any prolonged heat. And, pretty soon, once we get to the last couple of weeks of August, 90-degree temperatures become increasingly rare and increasingly difficult to attain unless you have the right upper air setup. And, we still, every day we come back to this trough in the east, ridge in the west idea. I really don't see too much change in that going forward. So until I see something really definitive with regards to that pattern changing from what it is, we will continue to just kind of move along as the trend is your friend. I will again state, however, that with the trough in the east pattern, if that holds as we go through the tropical storm season, we're going to have to be cautious. If one of those troughs drops in and creates a southerly flow along the East Coast at around the time that there is a tropical system approaching the East Coast, then there could be a problem. If we were in a weather pattern now with a persistent ridge in the east, I probably wouldn't worry so much. But being that this troughing in the east keeps showing up every 3 or 4 days, varying strengths, for now, these troughs have been progressive. In other words, they've been moving along from west to east, which would make tropical systems not very problematic for the mid-Atlantic and Northeast. But if that character changes, where these troughs maybe become a little less progressive and begin to, as we say, dig down a little bit further south and create more of a southerly flow along the East Coast, then there could be a problem. But there's no problem unless there's a tropical storm running around. So, there's a lot of things with a lot of pieces that have to come together for any kind of serious tropical storm threat. And most years we get away with not having to deal with any. So we're just going to do what I like to do, which is watch these models from day to day and from run to run, and not many make any real long-term specific conclusions. Wesley, so is there no chance of El Nino? Does that mean a weak La Nina? I assume you meant not El Nino. A weak La Nina, or is there some time for El Nino to form? I looked today at the water temperatures. To me, they look fairly average. I haven't not had a chance to really look at the El Nino issue, and I honestly have not been paying much attention to it. You have to understand, with respect to my own approach to all these things, I usually don't look at those factors until I have, when I'm not so focused on the short and medium range. A lot of this stuff takes a lot of time. I'm not trying to evade the question. I'm just simply saying that I don't always look. Every couple of weeks I might give it a peek, and I haven't done it for a while, so I don't want to give the wrong answer. The last time I looked, the water temperatures across the Atlantic and Pacific seemed pretty normal, and that there was no real sign of any El Nino or La Nina, and I think maybe at worst or at best, depending on how you look at it, maybe there was a weak El Nino developing. I don't know. I have to really give it a good check. I'm sorry I haven't gotten to it, because I know it's been asked a couple of times, but you get your hands full doing all this other stuff. And tonight I gave a library talk at my local library in Islip, Connecticut Library, and it went very well. Had a nice turnout, and if you happen to be in the New York, New Jersey, Long Island, Connecticut, Hudson Valley area, and you'd like me to come out to your local library to give a talk on weather, just let your library know that I'm available, and they can contact me. You can reach me on my Facebook page at Meteorologist Joe Cioffi, and maybe we can set something up. I really enjoy doing them, and I really enjoy meeting with all of you at these talks/lectures. They usually go pretty well. In the meantime, as far as the weather is concerned, again, we'll see. Let's see what the overnight models do with this tropical wave in the Atlantic. If the European again tries to develop some kind of system off the southeast coast of the U.S. over the weekend. And of course, we're going to continue to watch Tropical Storm Franklin as it makes its progress across the Yucatan Peninsula and then into the Gulf of Mexico. Let's see if it becomes the Atlantic's first hurricane of the season. I think last year it was Earl, I believe, that got it was the fifth storm that developed that became the season's first hurricane. So let's see if Franklin, which is the season's sixth tropical storm, whether this one becomes the first hurricane. All right, folks, we're going to call it a night, and we will be back tomorrow. I'll schedule up a live stream time so you can get ready to tune right in. If you're new, subscribe to my YouTube channel and hit the notifications button so that you get notified when I'm doing videos or when live streams are coming up. I've been doing at least one live stream today. Today I happen to do 3 of them. And by the way, a lot of this for me right now, I'm kind of testing out how I'm going to approach things in the event that I have a serious weather situation to deal with as far as doing these live streams and how I'm going to do them. And they seem to be working very well. At least I think they are, unless you folks out there tell me otherwise. So if you have any opinions on that or anything you'd like to see, or maybe some stuff that you really don't want to see, by all means, just let me know. You can let me know on a chat, or you can let me know on my Facebook page. Delvin, Boston sees some rain tonight. Haven't seen any rain. Did the storm track further south? Yes, it did. And the European, by the way, on this particular case, was wrong in being too far to the north and west. And it's been guilty of that lately. So we're going to have to watch to see if that bias holds. That's an important bias to consider. The trend for the last couple of months with these weather systems has been further south and east. And we saw that today. The entire axis of severe weather actually shifted further south. I didn't get very much rain here at all I mean, I don't even think it got maybe a quarter of an inch, maybe a little bit more. But um, that's been the trend. So that's something that we need to pay attention to if we're going to be in a forecasting situation with regards to anything tropical down the road. Rian says, I hear that whatever season, if only takes one or two major hurricanes to make. Oh, yeah. Well, look, here's the deal with that. And I've said this before. Whether a season is above average or below average, it really doesn't matter. You can have an above average year where none of the tropical systems hit land. You can have a below average year in terms of overall activity and have several of them hit land. So the bottom line is it's the one storm that hits that makes all the difference, and that's what we're looking at. It's not the overall activity, and it's when the tropical system forms and where it goes. Billy Johnson, Kings Park, which is not too far from me, a quarter of an inch. So I guessed about right. Seemed like about a quarter of an inch or so. And we had models forecasting 2-inch plus rains here. So it shows you where all of this wound up as everything did wind up shifting further to the south. So, all right, folks, look, have a great overnight and a good start to your Tuesday. I will schedule the next live stream time for sometime Tuesday morning, specifically as soon as I figure out how much sleep I'm going to need during tonight. Have a great evening. We'll talk to you on Tuesday.